So reading from Uniting Two Worlds, Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Volume 6. A few days later, Adikeshava Swami arrived in Mayapur to see Srila Prabhupada. Adikeshava was only 23 years old, and all of these things were creating a great strain upon him. Against his lawyer's advice, he had come to India in desperation to see Srila Prabhupada. For the preliminary hearing, he had worn a business suit and a regular haircut, but now he appeared before Srila Prabhupada with shaven head and saffron robes. Other sannyasis had also arrived, and they all gathered in Prabhupada's room, eager to get his direction. This movement is not brainwashing, Prabhupada began. We are brain-giving. First of all, you must have brain. Then there is a question of washing. But you have no brain. You do not know what is this life. You cannot explain what is the difference between a dead man and a living man. You have got so many big scientists and philosophers, but you do not know. So where is your brain? First of all, prove your brain, then there can be a question of washing. It is not brainwashing, it is brain-giving movement. Unfortunately, you have no brain. Therefore, you misunderstand. On this point, the Bhagavad Gita will explain. What do you think, brainwashing or brain-giving? Yes, said Adikeshava. This is good. Prabhupada said the devotees should consult among themselves, write an essay, and send it to the court. His main point was that most people could not understand the simple truth of the soul. They are in need of knowledge, and the Krishna consciousness movement is giving essential knowledge of the soul. Therefore, it is a brain-giving movement. Adikeshava took the role of the antagonists. Well, he said, I have a brain and it is functioning. Otherwise, how could I be speaking to you now? How could I even answer you? But that speaking and the dog's barking are the same thing, said Prabhupada. The dog is barking. What is the difference? He is speaking in a different language, that's all. The dog is barking and you are speaking. What is the difference? Adikeshava, but they say we have art, we have science. Whatever you may have, Prabhupada replied, you cannot answer the ultimate question. Arguments flew back and forth as other devotees in the room challenged Prabhupada's logic, but Prabhupada stuck to his main point. If a man doesn't know the difference between a dead man and a living man, if he doesn't know the soul, then he has no brain. When the devotees mentioned faith in scripture, Prabhupada said that he was not arguing on the basis of scripture, but on logic. Whatever arguments they raised, Prabhupada strongly defeated. There was no trace of illness or weakness in Prabhupada's demeanor as he drilled his men on how to defend by aggressive argument. They say that this discussion is beyond our intelligence, said Adikeshava. If you say beyond your intelligence, said Srila Prabhupada, that means you have no brain. In Prabhupada's association, Adikeshava gained strength and conviction. They complain, said Adikeshava, that if one becomes a devotee, he suffers a lot from loss of identity, but actually they don't know who they are. So we will challenge them like that. What is this loss of identity? You don't even know who you are, so you have nothing to lose. Carry on? Okay. I'll do this last bit. Yes, said Prabhupada, with great spirit. What is your identification? That you do not know. We are teaching that by identifying yourself with this body. You have lost your identity. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, Verse 5, Text 5. I'll do the invocation. I'm going to consult the Bhagavad Gita. Om Jnana-timirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabando Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Jnana-timirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschachadishtarine. So, text 5, Srimad Bhagavatam 1, chapter 2. Munaya Sadhu Prishtoham Bhavadbhir Loka Mangalam. Let's get the melody right. Munaya. Okay. Munaya Sadhu Prishtoham Bhavadbhir Loka Mangalam Yat Krita Krishna Samprashno Yenatma Suprasidati Munaya Sadhu Prishtoham Bhavadbhir Loka Mangalam Yat Krita Krishna Samprashno Yenatma Suprasidati Munaya Sadhu Prishtoham Bhavadbhir Loka Mangalam Yat Krita Krishna Samprashno Yenatma Suprasidati Munaya Sadhu Prishtoham Bhavadbhir Loka Mangalam Yat Krita Krishna Samprashno Yenatma Samprasidati Munaya Sadhu Prishtoham Bhavadbhir Loka Mangalam Yat Krita Krishna Samprashno Munaya sadhu prishtoham. Bhavadvir lokamangalam. Yakrita Krishna samprashno. Yenatma suprasidati.
Munaya sadhu prishtoham.
Munaya sadhu prishtoham. Bhavadvir lokamangalam. Yatkrita Krishna samprashno. Yenatma suprasidati.
Munaya sadhu prishtoham.
Munaya sadhu prishtoham. Bhavadvir lokamangalam. Yatkrita Krishna samprashno. Yenatma suprasidati. Munaya sadhu prishtoham. Bhavadvir lokamangalam. Yatkrita Krishna samprashno. Yenatma suprasidati. Munaya, O sages, sadhu, this is relevant. Prishta, questioned. Aham, myself. Bhavadvi, by all of you. Loka, the world. Mangalam, welfare. Yat, because. Krita, made. Krishna, the personality of Godhead. Samprashna, relevant question. Yena, by which. Atma, self. Suprasidati, completely pleased. O sages, I have been justly questioned by you. Your questions are worthy because they relate to Lord Krishna, and so are of relevance to the world's welfare. Only questions of this sort are capable of completely satisfying the self. I'll read that again. O sages, I have been justly questioned by you. Your questions are worthy because they relate to Lord Krishna, and so are of relevance to the world's welfare. Only questions of this sort are capable of completely satisfying the self. O sages, I have been justly questioned by you. Your questions are worthy because they relate to Lord Krishna, and so are of relevance to the world's welfare. Only questions of this sort are capable of completely satisfying the self. Purport, that is Divine Grace. Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Since it has been stated herein before that in the Bhagavatam the absolute truth is to be known, the questions of the sages of Naimisharanya are proper and just, because they pertain to Krishna, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth. In Bhagavad Gita 15:15, the Personality of Godhead says that in all the Vedas there is nothing but the urge for searching after him, Lord Krishna. Thus the questions that pertain to Krishna are the sum and substance of all the Vedic inquiries. The whole world is full of questions and answers. The birds, beasts, and men are all busy in the matter of perpetual questions and answers. In the morning, the birds in the nest become busy with questions and answers. And in the evening, also, the same birds come back and again become busy with questions and answers. The human being, unless he is fast asleep at night, is busy with questions and answers. The businessmen in the market are busy with questions and answers, and so also the lawyers in the court, and the students in the schools and colleges. The legislators in the parliament are also busy with questions and answers, and the politicians and the press representatives are all busy with questions and answers. Although they go on making such questions and answers for their whole lives, they are not at all satisfied. Satisfaction of the soul can only be obtained by questions and answers on the subject of Krishna. Krishna is our most intimate master, friend, father or son, and object of conjugal love. Forgetting Krishna, we have created so many objects of questions and answers, but none of them are able to give us complete satisfaction. All things but Krishna give temporary satisfaction only. So if we are to have complete satisfaction, we must take to the questions and answers about Krishna. We cannot live for a moment without being questioned or without giving answers. Because the Srimad Bhagavatam deals with questions and answers that are related to Krishna, we can derive the highest satisfaction only by reading and hearing this transcendental literature. One should learn the Srimad Bhagavatam and make an all-round solution to all problems pertaining to social, political, or religious matters. Srimad Bhagavatam and Krishna are the sum total of all things. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. On the invocation, so I'll just this is my technically speaking, this is my debut class by the mercy of the devotees that have allowed me to speak today. So that's a very great honor. It's very humbling, and for me, it doesn't feel like my first class because I do sort of channel Srila Prabhupada's wisdom and write it down and sort of preach to myself. So for me, it isn't my first class, but technically speaking, it is. Just like yesterday, we had Robbie. He has his debut drama, Back to Robbie, and it was as if he's been doing it for years. So I don't know how that is, but it's obviously by the mercy of the devotees that are able to become empowered to do these things. So I pray for your blessings. So I'm going to read through the purport again and just pull out a few things that strike me. So, since it has been stated herein that in the Srimad Bhagavatam the absolute truth is to be known, the questions of the sages of Naimisharanya are proper and just. So Naimisharanya is a holy gathering place in a forest. It's believed that that place is considered to be the center of the universe because it's so holy, and Krishna is accessible in that place. So the sages are gathered in this location about 5,000 years ago. Of course, Srimad Bhagavatam is spoken twice. It's re-spoken again, and in a disciplic succession, it becomes sweeter each time it's spoken. But the point I would like to make here is that 5,000 years ago, the sages gathered at Naimisharanya to discuss questions and answers regarding the welfare of us now in Kali Yuga. So they were so compassionate, these sages, that they were asking questions and answers for our welfare 5,000 years ago. So this is a very relevant point, is that these questions and answers are pertaining to our welfare, and they're regarding Krishna conscious activities, or Krishna conscious Leela, or Krishna Katha, as we call it. So this is this hearing and speaking about Krishna is meant for our welfare 5,000 years ago. And as Raghunath Prabhu and myself and a few other devotees were discussing these verses and purports, one came up about this point of Naimisharan, and I made the point to Raghunath Prabhu, and he liked it, that these sages were so compassionate that they were thinking of our welfare 5,000 years ago, whereas we, in modern society, we tend to think of our own welfare in the present, or our next generation, or the generation after that. We're not thinking so far ahead. So how compassionate really are we? How sage-like are we? So this is something to think about, how we can be more compassionate for people extended into the future of the Kali Yuga. You know, how are things going to be like 5,000 years from now? How are people going to be suffering in as the age progresses into a more wintry kind of dystopian kind of version of what we have now? And what is the solution for this natural progression towards darker times, as the Srimad Bhagavatam predicts will happen as a natural course of the natural cycle of the age that we're in, is that things are going to get worse. Life duration is going to decrease. Our memories are going to decrease. Srila Prabhupada is talking about we have no brain. We do have a brain, but our memory and our ability to use it correctly is being compromised by the nature of the Kali Yuga, of the age that we live in. On all levels, everything is becoming degraded over a period of time. So this is the Vedic understanding of the times that we're living in and the times that are ahead of us. But there is light. The Srimad Bhagavatam is the light for this age of Kali. And the reason why it's the light is because it's topics about Krishna. They pertain to Krishna. The questions that are put forward by the persons in the Srimad Bhagavatam, particularly Maharaj Parikshit, who's a great king, a saintly king, and he's given a week only to live. He's been put in a situation where he has a week only to live, and he's a saintly king, so he wants to know the goal of life. He wants to know about Krishna, and he's humbly submitting himself before Shukadev Goswami, and he's asking questions and he's getting answers. But these questions are related to absolute truth. They're not related to relevant truth. He's not asking, why have I only got a week to live? What can I do about it? Can I get out of this situation? He's accepted his relevant truth, his relative truth, and he's asking questions of a different nature about the absolute truth, and he's getting the answers. So this is what we should be doing in the modern age, particularly as we're so short-lived. We have at best 100 years to live, and we have to use this time wisely. So the wisest use of our time, the most efficient use of our time in our lives, and particularly in Kali Yuga with a short life, is we have to use it to inquire about topics that are of an absolute nature, that are of the absolute truth. So here at the bottom, Srila Prabhupada in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is saying, he's instructing actually, one should learn the Srimad Bhagavatam and make an all-around solution to all problems pertaining to social, political, or religious matters. Srimad Bhagavatam and Krishna are the sum total of all things. So this is a life instruction we're being given here by Srila Prabhupada in the purport, that we should learn the Srimad Bhagavatam and make an all-round solution to all the problems pertaining to social, political, or religious matters. So that includes how to deal with death, how to deal with our life, how to prioritize our lives so that the focus is for our welfare beyond this temporary body and beyond the matters of concern that relate to the temporary body. And as we all know, in modern society, our education, the media, the TV, the internet, the forums, the social medias, generally, whether it's a conspiracy, a conscious conspiracy or an unconscious conspiracy, there is a conspiracy going on where people are almost obliged to ignore the absolute truth and focus on the relative truths, and the questions and answers are pertaining to these things. Like in a forum, you'll have somebody will make a statement, which is basically an answer, and then from there that will provoke more questions, and then more answers, and then probably an argument, and then more questions and answers, and it goes on perpetually. So it's not really very satisfying. It's kind of temporarily, it's engaging. The news, the politics, they do engage us in some kind of temporary happiness, but they don't satisfy the soul, and they don't solve the problems of life. They don't give us any hope of welfare beyond the body, and they certainly don't consider the welfare of people, future generations to come, as the sages are doing here in the conversations regarding absolute truth in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So we can take a step back from all this brainwashing through our educational systems, the media, etc. We're actually asking questions is kind of to some degree, it's taken out the picture. There's a sense of being numbed down. When you watch TV, I don't watch TV anymore, but I used to growing up. And I did actually clock that I was watching TV and not questioning what I was seeing. So, like, just any old nonsense can come up on the TV and you don't question it. It's just there and you accept it and you watch it, and then there's more of it, and there's no time to think. There's no time to ask questions. You're just being bombarded with various nonsensical ideas, and we accept them. We accept them as our reality, and sometimes we accept them as absolute truth. So this is brainwashing. This is not what society is meant to provoke. The same educational system. There's an element of numbing down. We're asking questions. We're being provoked to ask questions of subject matters that are of of relative importance, and they're subject to change. So that which is subject to change is relative. So our body is subject to change, it's relative. The nature of the material world is always changing, and the topics relating to the material world are relative. They have a relative truth, and the questions are relative, and the answers are relative. And this is being provoked by our modern education system to not look beyond this relative topic matter. Shri Shri Kodanitai Maya Prashashi Ki. Shri Tulsinath Maharaj Ki. Shri Giridhara Lal Ki. Shri Nishingadev Bhagavan Ki. Srila Prabhupada Ki. So this is it basically. We're being encouraged to ask questions and accept answers based on relative subject matter. And this is encouraged in our media, our educational system, in the politics, in the religious field as well. You're this religion, I'm that religion. This is relative. You can change your religion. You can change your faith. This is relative. Religion, Srila Prabhupada is very outspoken here. He's including religious matters in the relative topics, the relative subject matter. And he's asking us to learn Srimad Bhagavatam, which is absolute subject matter, and present that as an all-round solution to all these problems in these fields of social, political, and religious matters. So learn, what does learn mean? Learn can mean parrot fashion. We can read, we can recite, and that's good. It's very purifying. As we're just going through the Sanskrit verse, it's very purifying to hear. It awakens realization of an eternal nature when we hear, even in parrot fashion, when we just read. This is very purifying. But learn can also mean like learning a lesson. When you learn a lesson, you imbibe the emotional memory of the experience, and a realization is attached to that learning. It's not just a logical formula, although logic, as we're hearing in the Lilamrita, logical arguments are very good, but they can also be loaded with this emotional memory, or an emotional, a spiritual realization is for a more direct term. So learning the Srimad Bhagavatam can mean that we can realize it, we can become, to some degree, a walking Srimad Bhagavatams, examples of the nature of the eternal absolute. We can mold our own lives so that we're also asking questions of an eternal nature about Krishna, and we're receiving answers of an absolute nature as well. So the Society of Krishna Consciousness facilitates that opportunity. It's in the Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita, that the devotees are always enlivening and enlightening one another about their realizations about Krishna consciousness. So this, from my own experience, this is a very enlivening experience, a very satisfying experience. You hear something in a class, you read something, some realization awakens in the heart, some experience awakens from the chanting, from the kirtan. And we share that with the devotees, and it enlivens the devotees, and it's enlivening for oneself. And it's a relationship. You build a relationship that's based on something that's not temporary and that's not fallible. So those relationships within a society that's built around questions and answers about Krishna are very satisfying and very deep. The relationships become very deep and meaningful, and they're never going to go away. Whereas in modern society, our relationships based on relative truth is very lamentable, because these relationships are going to be subject to change. They're going to be interrupted, broken, and inconvenienced by relative nature, which will break those connections. And that can be very distressing. It can be very heartbreaking for people who put their faith into these kind of relative interactions. So that we want to break away from this, and we want to develop real relationships with each other. And the only way to really develop a relationship with each other is when it pertains to Krishna, because Krishna is the pivotal point of everything. Krishna is the origin of everything. He's the supreme personality of Godhead. Godhead means the fountainhead of everything, and Krishna is the personality of that place, that abode. The Godhead is Krishna's abode, from which everything flourishes and centers around that abode. As we see this picture over here, it's Krishna in his abode, Goloka Vrindavan, Godhead. And then from there around it is the spiritual universes. And then from there we have the Mahatattva, which is the material, the sum total of the material universes. And then we have us in one of those tiny worlds within one of those universes. So we center around Krishna, and everything we do does center around Krishna. It's just a case of realizing it and putting it into practice. And when we start to relate all our activities, our relationships, our skills, everything that we do in life, when we relate that back to Krishna as a central point, the reciprocal of everything that we do, then life becomes very satisfying. Our relationships become meaningful, are very deep and very loving. And there's an exchange there, a deep, loving exchange. So this is what we're looking for in life, is this loving exchange. And a question and an answer is a loving exchange. So when we have a question that pertains to Krishna, and we get an answer that relates to Krishna, that's a very satisfying, loving relationship. And that works on all levels. It works for beginners, and it works for very advanced devotees, and it works for the residents of the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, they're still asking questions and they're still getting answers. But those questions are very, very refined, they're very elevated. They're totally spiritual. So they may be asking, does Krishna love me or does he not love me? What time is Krishna coming home? Where is Krishna? How come he's not returned home yet? Where's Krishna? Where is Krishna is the main question that we're asking. And they ask this in the spiritual world, and we're asking this in the material world. The difference is that in the spiritual world, they have realization that they're asking about Krishna. And here, our questions are more indirect. They're more formal. So we're asking these formal questions. Who are we? Where are we from? How do we progress? These are all very good questions. They're all perfect questions. We have this book, Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers, which I'll come back to. So we can ask perfect questions, but they may be a bit more formal than the more advanced versions of these questions. But they're still there in the spiritual world, the questions and the answers. And they're a very good format for a relationship. So here, we can ask formal questions, and we can get formal answers, and we can do that through this process of disciplic succession, or process of teacher and student, or spiritual master and disciple. So this is what is being recommended throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita, and all of Srila Prabhupada's teachings, is that we submissively inquire from the spiritual master, the bona fide spiritual master, and then he will impart this transcendental knowledge, these answers of an absolute nature pertaining to Krishna. He will be able to impart those answers to us if we ask questions that are relevant and questions in a submissive, not a challenging nature. If we are asking questions in a challenging nature, then the questions still, they may be perfect questions, they may be relevant, but our attitude is our attitude would suggest that our goal is not necessarily Krishna, that our goal is something of the nature of niscience or something temporary. There's some doubt there. So if we have some doubt, then there'll be a sense of a lack of satisfaction, So we have to dispel this doubt, because Krishna says that for the doubting soul, there is no happiness in this life or the next. So this is, in our modern society, doubt is being encouraged. The doubt of anything to do with the absolute nature is actually being encouraged. And this is something we need to get rid of. This is something we need to become purified from. So Srila Prabhupada is saying that it's a brain-giving society. It's not a brainwashing society. We're trying to clean ourselves of this brainwashing influence of society, which instills doubt into our real nature, which is spiritual. So we have to dispel this doubt, and we have to beg for the help of the devotees in a submissive attitude to dispel this doubt. If we come with a challenging attitude with our questions, then it kind of suggests that we're putting faith into these doubts that we're being contaminated with. So the process recommended is not just questions and answers of a spiritual nature, but also in the frame of mind. We can clock our frame of minds by how submissive we are, because if we're not submissive, it's because we put our faith in things that are of a relative nature. And this is something that Srila Prabhupada is basically batting out of us in this purport. So, are there any questions so far? Or any pointers?
One experience that I've had is I've been accused at one point in a derogatory way of being called such an absolutist, and it really taught me actually that to listen, to have that loving exchange, that communication between myself and another, to actually really listen to what the heart's calling for. And it's kind of provoked me to meditate on the fact that there's the three phases of God realization, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. And it is possible to go straight to Bhagavan to realize the two consequences, but also some people aren't quite ready for that. And so with me being so enthusiastic about the absolute, it's almost been like trying to force feed them. With some people, I may have an attachment because I care so much about them, but taking a step back and just realizing what they're trying to realize and what they're ready for, and going step by step, that's been like a really good lesson for me, to not push them in the other direction.
Yes, excellent points, excellent pointer to speak a bit more. So, we are. The reason why all the birds and beasts and everyone is asking questions and giving answers is because
for Krishna, but they're doing it in an indirect way. They don't know. Of course, as far as we know, I mean, we have Twitter, birds, but the birds, they don't have the social media. They don't have, they're not being brainwashed as such, but they are covered over, and they are, apart from the birds in Vrindavan, they are actually devotees, and they are speaking a transcendental language. So their topics are different. But generally, the birds, the beasts, and the men, or the man, woman, they are engaging in mundane is the word we use, mundane subject matter. But they're looking for Krishna, and they are asking questions. They want to find Krishna. It's just they're unfortunate. They don't have this knowledge that we've been given. So one can be forgiven for being over enthusiastic when they first get this knowledge, and being an absolutist when they're on this path. When I was 16, 17 was when I first something clicked with these books. They've been around me for most of my life, actually. As I look back in my self-pity about my life, I can see that Krishna was there all along. He was on the bookshelf right from day one. My parents were kind of a sort of bohemian, free-thinking type. Very nice parents, actually. But they kind of missed the boat. They didn't get to meet Srila Prabhupada. They didn't know much about spiritual life. And that's unfortunate. But they had Krishna around them. Krishna was there. They were of that era, that age, of Srila Prabhupada's age. So they had, some sort of flavor of that age. And growing up, I'd noticed that the books were there all along in my house. And I got a few pamphlets here and there. When I was very young, I think it was about 12, I got my first pamphlet, which was the teachings of Prahlad Maharaj. And of course, it was too absolute for me then. It was too in your face. But something really struck me about the front cover, the pictures on it. And that was 1% spiritual advancement. I only gave a very small donation for it, and I still feel bad because I kept 10p back because it was the first time I'd been accosted. My parents were there, but I got accosted just when they walked off. And I thought, it's cheeky. It's a bit cheeky. It just struck me back, So I gave him I think I gave him over half. So they say 50% is 100%. So I gave him a donation, but I kept 10p back and made some lame excuse like I needed it for the phone or something. I still regret it now. But it was just, I wasn't that surrendered. But I could see that this devotee, this book distributor, there was something very special about him, and it struck me. His posture was very good as well. I don't have a good posture, but he had a super posture, and his composure, you could just see there was something about this person, and his cheekiness really struck me. I was in awe of it. It's amazing. So anyway, I took this pamphlet, and all I got out of it was the front cover. And later on, after more years of suffering, more years of questions and answers of a relative nature, when I finished school, when I was 16, I was listening to the Beatles, and there's that, I think it's John Lennon, Just Give Me the Truth. He's singing a song, Just Give Me the Truth. It's a good song, actually. It's something about a merry-go-round going round, which is like the cycle of birth and death. So that invoked something. And around that time, I had a library of books that somehow I'd attracted the books. And I started to read them. And then I was an absolutist. I was on an absolute path, and I was just ripe at that time. End of 17, my 17th year, I read the books, and as I was reading it, I began to change. So I was very fortunate to receive that. I don't know how I got that fortune. I certainly didn't deserve it, but I had these books and I read them. And the first one I read was The Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers. I don't know why that was the first one I read of it. It was the first one that I had available to read that really struck me. So I read that, and it's a very nice book about this devotee called, it's a conversation, as many of Srila Prabhupada's introductory books are. There is one with John Lennon in actually asking questions and answers. But this is Bob Cohen, who became a pure devotee of Krishna. I think he's called Brahmatirtha Prabhu. He's a very, very well-respected, very advanced devotee of Krishna. But then he was known as Bob Cohen, and he was, I don't know the details, he was a welfare worker that was on a visit to India, and he met Srila Prabhupada in Mayapur, almost by chance. He'd heard of the devotees and stuff, but anyway, he met Srila Prabhupada, and something inspired him to ask him to serve. I think it was with the Food for Life program or some welfare program. I think it was Food for Scotland, not Food for Scotland, Food for Mayapur, but the same thing. So he was following, in his own words, he's speaking on following Srila Prabhupada. It's a DVD set or a YouTube set, and it's a narrative about Srila Prabhupada's life by the devotees that were involved in those particular instances. I really recommend it. It's a very nicely put together documentary. Excellent. So anyway, he's speaking on it, and he was saying that unbeknownst to him at the time, he was actually following the process. He was engaging in humble service. So he was offering to help with the food relief program, the prasadam distribution, basically, which is a higher welfare, as we know, distributing food that has been offered and blessed by Krishna. This is the highest form of welfare. And he was doing that, and he was asking very, very actually intelligent questions for the benefit of other people. Actually, he was a very intelligent chap at the time, and very caring about other people. That was his quest in India. So he had the right motivation, and of course he got the perfect answers. And this book, Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers, is a document of this conversation, just as it was, as it is. And I recommend it. It's a super book. I've given out, not to brag or anything, but it's, as a book distributor, I've given out thousands of this book, and it's a really nice book to distribute. Whether people will read it and become pure devotees is another question, but people will take that book, and even if they read 1 or 2 words in that book, they'll get the benefit. But the interesting thing about this book is the nature of the questions and the nature of the answers. So for an absolutist, somebody who's looking for the absolute truth, their good fortune is to stumble across one of these books, one of Srila Prabhupada's books. And it's our duty as followers of Srila Prabhupada is to present people with these books. There's only so much preaching we can do. There's only so much things I can say here. If you can see, I'm a bit nervous. There's some scattiness to my class. But the essence of it is that we can try to present Krishna consciousness in a nice way for other people, a way that is relevant and relative to that person, so that you can take into consideration people's relative nature, relative likes and dislikes. These pertain to the mind and the false ego, and to our spiritual nature as well. Of course, we're all individuals and we all have our own spiritual natures, and that's an eternal quest, is to explore those possibilities, whether in the material or the spiritual world. And we are trying to do that, but we're trying to do that through a series of relative choices. I like these jeans. I like this t-shirt. I like this haircut. I like this pop star. I like this. Here's my Facebook account. These are my likes and dislikes. And it's just a series of yeses and nos based on relative truths. And this never really touches the real person or the soul of that person. It's just a yes-no. You go down these yes-no avenues and you end up with a product. And there's different categories, and you go down one. Even in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is saying, if you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, you'll end up with that. And if you do this, you do that, and you do this, you'll end up with that. But if you do this, and you do this, then you'll get this. This will be what you want. So that's a system of yeses and nos, and we get a certain result if we do that. But because we're acting on a relative platform, our yeses and nos, we're just ending up with another temporary result. We're getting another temporary version of who we are. And everyone is subject to this, the 3 modes of nature, and making choices based on these different modes, and we end up with a certain colouring, a certain pattern of behaviour, and we call that ourselves. So we have to relate to people based on this, but we have to also remind people that they're not really that thing, that product at the end, a product of material nature. That we are not a product of material nature. We're a spiritual being that has never actually come into being. We've always existed in one sense, and we're eternal, unborn, unchangeable, immutable, never slain with the body. This is us. This is who we are, and how we relate from that platform, our constitutional platform, is as servants of Krishna, who is the supreme perfect person. We're also perfect, but we're only perfect and qualitatively realized when we connect with Krishna. So because we're doing that indirectly, and our questions and answers are indirect, we're dulled down. We're not realizing our true expression. Our effulgence isn't there. It's covered over. Everything is dull down, and we're trying to jazz it up, trying to make ourselves look more effulgent and more attractive to other people, and it's not working. The process isn't working. I remember when I was reading my first books, particularly the Sri Ishapanisad was, I think, the second book I read that really struck me. There was an internal desire to become attractive. I wanted to be attractive, but really attractive, not superficially. I wasn't really bothered about that. course, he probably had spots at the time and stuff. So I was only a kid, really. And I'm all right, but I wasn't an attractive guy or anything. But I wanted to feel attractive, and I didn't. So when I started to read these books, I started to feel this inner attractive version of myself was coming out, and I thought, well, yeah, I can do that. I'll do that. Yes, don't be like this. Okay, I'll do that now. And I could feel myself was changing as I was reading the book, and I was becoming more attractive. But what does it mean to be attractive? To be attractive means to be attractive to Krishna. That's what attractive means. And how do we be attractive to Krishna? By becoming attracted to Krishna. So that's a very interesting absolute truth. In the relative world, things are a bit topsy-turvy. If somebody is repulsed by us, or this kind of playing hard to get, as they say in the modern male-female sort of, that sort of psychology, we find it very attractive if somebody is not attracted to us. Why? I don't know, but it's topsy-turvy. Whereas in the spiritual world, Krishna isn't attracted to people that are not attracted to him. He's not interested. He's attracted to people that become attracted to him or that want to be attracted to him. And Krishna will give those people all facility to take further steps towards him. All facility. Even if it's a very, very tiny question like, just a little something about where are we from, who are we? Krishna will reciprocate with that to a point of building on that attraction, because that's what it is. It's an awakening, a rumbling of something, of something. An urgency is in there to become attracted to Krishna, and because we don't know, we've forgotten who Krishna is, then Krishna will reciprocate with that if we show a little sign of attraction there, an attraction to nature. What is the source of the sun? Well, we see the sun every day, and we're not questioning what is the sun, why does it shine, where does the sun come from, how does it shine, who is making it shine. That these are interesting questions, and they invoke an attraction to Krishna, and Krishna will reciprocate. He will give us the answers according to our nature and our understanding at that particular time. Krishna will impart knowledge from within and without, and eventually, as we become more realized, Krishna will be able to give us more direct knowledge to the point where we're actually able and ready to surrender to the spiritual master, who can completely impart this transcendental knowledge to us seamlessly and flawlessly, without any sort of fluff or sugarcoating or anything. Hare Krishna. Please, yeah.
Yeah, just in relation to Amanda's question. When we take to Krishna consciousness and we become attracted with absolute truth, it's difficult to relate to the relative world again. And sometimes people may accuse you of being absolutist, but then you can simply say, well, is that a bad thing? Maybe you're saying that's a bad thing. Another thing is that it then becomes apparent to us that we need the association with devotees, because we're no longer interested in discussing temporary relative things, and therefore the things which we're really interested in, we can only speak with other people who are interested in the same things. So Sadhu Sangha or Vaishnava Sangha then becomes like nourishment for us. And then the problem is sometimes how to relate them to those who are not interested. So if you know they're not interested, then Prabhupada showed the example actually in a few cases where he just actually spoke about things that they were interested in, or let them speak. Even when they got the Detroit temple, and the devotees were, I think they were maybe like concerned with the neighbours because they were making a bit of noise with kirtan and stuff. And Prabhupada went to see them, with some old people, and he was just talking about kind of mundane things, and the person was talking about their false teeth. Prabhupada said, they said, I eat, the person said, I eat too many sweets. Prabhupada said, I like sweets too, but I still have my teeth. So they were just talking about kind of mundane things. He wasn't going into, do you realise, one of your sweets. So people are not ready for that engagement. Yeah. So we satisfy the need for the discussing in absolute terms with the association of devotees. Like, at the temple you can say Haribo Prabhu, sitting on the basis, and so on, you can say these things, but you can't say that to mundane people, and it's a pleasure to do that, isn't it? And then when we're relating to mundane people, if they're interested, then we can feed their interest, if not, then just be friendly with them.
What I was, like, the specifics as well of what I was referring to was people that I know have an interest in God, but they're not ready to jump to Bhagavatam realization. They're trying to access Brahman realization, and they're sort of floundering a little bit. So like trying to find a way of hearing where they're at and kind of going step by step instead of just talking about Krishna and like this blue guy, what's that about? What are the deities, you're an idol worshipper. You know, it's like the wrong level, but still trying to relate it to God in some way, but how they can relate.
Yeah, you should punish that. It's a good book too for them.
Yeah.
You can read that in a philosophical way that Prabhupada presents that, can present it to them in such a way that's acceptable, that they can see the different stages.
It's an excellent point, excellent point. So at the moment, we've been in a lockdown for over a year, isn't it? It's way over a year. And
I've only had the association of these wonderful devotees, and also the devotees online as well have been tuning into that, which again is topics of Srimad Bhagavatam all the way. Especially I'm listening to His Holiness Indradyumna Maharaj, and the subject matter is completely spiritual. It's completely spiritual, and this is very nice to do. But obviously, yeah, to then relay that to someone who has no knowledge of Krishna to that degree. And outside of this is a very unusual situation for me, is just being around devotees in this inner circle. So there isn't anything else to talk about other than Krishna, really, or where's the prasadam hall key or something like that. But even that, it relates to Krishna, because it's prasadam. People want the key so they can get the prasadam. It wasn't me. I didn't have the key, as it turns out. But it's an interesting question, because it provokes eagerness to take prasadam. So this is, again, it's relating to Krishna.
But even devotees speaking about mundane things, if it's related to Krishna.
Yeah.
Like somebody maybe giving somebody's keys for Krishna carrying into the wall or something.
Yeah.
But it's because it's Krishna's property.
yeah,
We're supposed to look after it, or maybe discussing how to use the washing machine or something like that.
yeah.
It's like a clean clothes to serve Krishna.
Uh,
So it's all related, it's not mundane when it comes to, if your activities are all engaged in devotion service, then it's all related.
yeah,
One thing I just wanted to pick up on what you were saying, in my experience, the point you were making about Sadhu Sangha is just like right up there, because, you know, after re-encountering Krishna consciousness about 4 years ago, I've been like feeling desperate for this, you know, and it's kind of brought the realization of being here is that I have to keep nourishing myself with association, because I've always just been thinking how I can help somebody else, but I have to focus on like getting to where I want to get before I can actually be of like proper benefit.
Yeah, I had the same question to Bhagavatam with us many years ago, and he said, first let it be a strong swimmer yourself before you're trying to save someone else. So you don't want to go to save somebody and then you go down with them. And that happens, you go to some devotees with all good intentions, they spoil the devotional service because they get back into other things that they thought they would left behind. And it's really important. It's not being selfish either, it's a kind of selfishness which is allowed. Because if you make yourself strong, then you can actually do some good, isn't it?
Yeah, self-care.
Self-care is important.
like an example that I wanted to mention that I really like is the lemon. An example of the lemon. A lemon absorbs the water and the sunshine. It absorbs the water and stuff like that. You like gardening, people gardening here, so I don't grow lemons, but maybe that day will come. So it's absorbing the sunshine and the water, and the result is you get a lemon, and when you squeeze a lemon, the lemon juice comes out, and the lemon juice is basically a synthesis of water and sunshine, and it's tasty. It's lemon juice, and it's tasty because it's got water and it's got sunshine in it. So when we're squeezed as people, when we're asked questions, who are you? What's your purpose being here? How come you look a certain way, or whatever it is, or just a mundane question, then it's squeezing us in a certain way. There's something that's going to come out just naturally. If we're squeezed for money, or even whatever it is, something is going to come out in that situation. And if we're absorbing the right thing, that stuff that's coming out is going to be Krishna conscious in one way or another, even if it's not direct, Whereas if you're just, talking about Krishna all the time and nobody's squeezing you, that's kind of like not really what we're trying to achieve here. What we're trying to achieve is to become the lemon that when it gets squeezed, the juicy stuff is coming out. So when we're in a normal conversation, a mundane conversation, something will come out, whether it's on a subtle platform, either, or a sublime thing will come out of us, will radiate from us when we're in the association of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the holy name, the devotees, the sadhus, the gurus. That will pervade through our nature, and people will pick up on it, even if we're talking about dentures or something. It doesn't matter. Like we should have, we didn't have to say anything. The dogs were bowing down to Srila Prabhupada just by looking at it. So this is the level we want to get to. We know what the process is. We know how to practice. In fact, we're instructed here by Srila Prabhupada. We can learn the Srimad Bhagavatam. So that's given by Srila Prabhupada, that instruction. And we can follow that. And by doing that, we'll become lemon-like, we'll become juicy, and we'll be absorbing the right thing. So it will naturally come out. It will naturally give off that essential thing that people are looking for. And it doesn't need to be an artificial endeavour to do that. But we do have some pointers. We can distribute Srila Prabhupada's books. If you don't have the books, if you can't afford to buy the books, as I was experiencing, you can still talk about the books. You can plug the books. You can advertise the books in a natural way, according to how you've read them, how you've digested them, and to some degree assimilated them into your own mind. And then that becomes quite a nice conversation. You can actually say things that are relatable, and from a relatable point.
Yeah. I was going to say that if we feel that one can confidently convince somebody, then find a book of Prabhupada's, which is the other thing is we listed Prabhupada's arguments related to, what you say, trying to elevate people from the impersonal aspect to the personal aspect. And so there's many kind of logical arguments Prabhupada gives. And it's just a matter of whether the person actually wants to hear it, because they say that you can't wake up someone who's pretending to sleep. So if people are genuinely seeking and then we hear something, there's many examples in Bhagavatam, like the four Kumaras who had achieved Brahman realization, but when they were purified by just smelling tulsi, then accept the personality of Godhead. So because they were still searching, they found the impersonal, absolute aspect. But they didn't just stop at that. But some people, they don't necessarily want to go, so it's a matter of, are they still searching, or is it just a pose that they're searching? So if they're honest and give them some good logic, give them some good Prabhupada books, then they'll go further. If not, then just have to let them be with what they want to be in. Time is short in life, and just give their time to those who are going to take to Krishna consciousness and not be particularly attached to certain individuals or groups of people. We'll find other people as well.
Thank you. Nice point. In terms of people being stuck on a certain level of acceptance, they should have probably had a technique for that. He would ask them a question, and he would listen to the answer, and then he would ask them another question, and he would lead them down a garden path of ridiculousness, to the point where their answer was so ridiculous that it was like they're preaching to themselves. And that was a well-known technique that Srila Prabhupada used. So these questions and answers is very, very relevant. It's a very flow. This is a natural thing that we do. It's inherent in our nature. But you can employ this as a technique to, what's your version? Why do you do that? Why do you smoke? And then they give an answer. And then, well, why do you do that? And it gets to a point where it is actually ridiculous. And it invokes in them questions. Well, why? Why are we doing that? So this is another technique. I guess to have a natural inkling to go towards Krishna, that's something that we need to be exploring ourselves. We need to really tune into the super soul, the Paramatma in the heart. And one sure way of doing that, of course, is chanting Hare Krishna. This will align all our desires, all our questions and answers with a perfect, and they'll be in perfect alignment, so that we'll always be going forward in our discourses in this field of questions and answers. And that will be the greatest welfare for ourselves and the greatest welfare for everyone. So we can all chant Hare Krishna, summarize it, we'll all chant Hare Krishna, and then we'll all be working towards the welfare for each other and for ourselves. And the topic matter of our daily discourses and question and answers will automatically align with going forward in our spiritual journey back home, back to Godhead.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Jai. Jai. Jai.